snow buried everything around them. Not even the old defense tower was visible anymore. The wind screamed like a wild beast across the frozen wastelands. Somewhere beneath the shattered sky, an alien girl was dying in the snow. Her thin body trembled. Her skin, once violet and bright, was turning pale gray. Her pulse slowed, her vision faded. She couldn't remember how long she'd been crawling. The cold didn't just bite her skin. It stabbed into her bones. Her name was Kira. She had escaped. The blast with a torn suit and one leg nearly frozen solid. Her shuttle had been shot down in the first wave. She had been on a diplomatic mission. Now the war had come and left her to die on a planet not even mapped by her people. She expected to die alone. But then, above the howl of the storm, she heard something, a crunch, footsteps in snow, heavy ones. Someone was coming toward her. She raised her head with the last of her strength. Through her frostbitten eyelashes she saw a shape. Tall, wrapped in layers. Human, the man knelt. His beard was full of ice. His eyes were calm, but not cold. He didn't speak. He took off his outer coat and wrapped it around her shaking frame. Her body was nearly lifeless. Still, he didn't hesitate. He lifted her up. Like she weighed nothing. She wanted to protest, to warn him she wasn't safe. That her people had fired first, but her lips couldn't move. Her mind flickered like a dying flame. Then she passed out in his arms. The bunker he carried her to was small and hidden beneath the snow. The door barely opened against the wind. But inside it was warm. Not much, but warmer than outside. He laid her down gently on a pile of thermal blankets. His hands moved fast. He peeled away the cracked layers of her suit, wrapped her in emergency heat pads, set up 4 fluids and powered up the solar heater. Kira woke hours later. Her eyes fluttered open, heart still weak. She didn't know the language the human spoke, but his tone was gentle. He wasn't a soldier. He looked more like a survivalist. Alone, hidden, cautious. He didn't ask questions. He didn't demand answers. He just kept her warm, fed her, helped her sit up when she regained strength. Slowly, her body began to recover. Days passed. The war outside continued, but in the shelter, it was quiet. Kira still didn't trust him fully, but each time he returned from scavenging in the snow, her chest eased. She started watching for his shadow near the door. He called himself Jacob. His voice was low, calm. He didn't smile much, but he wasn't cruel. Sometimes he fixed the radio. Sometimes he stared at the old photograph taped to the wall. A woman and a child. Human. Lost, maybe. She noticed the way he looked outside, always alert, like he expected someone to come. When she asked with gestures, he only said one word. Searchers, Kira understood. Soldiers from either side might come looking. Neither would be kind. One night, a faint boom echoed across the sky. Then another. Jacob looked up sharply. He handed her a blanket, moved quickly to seal the outer door. The war was creeping closer. That night she slept near the heater, her head just a few inches from his boots. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She didn't know why. But something in his silence made her feel safe. She tried to ask why he was alone, why he helped her, why he didn't hand her over to his people. But her words came out broken. She hated how helpless she sounded. But he listened patiently. Eventually, he pointed to the same photo. The woman. The child. Then he pointed at Kira's bruised arm, wrapped in fresh gauze. Then back to the photo. She understood what he meant. He had lost someone. Maybe this was his way to honor them. Kira began helping him. She organized supplies. Cooked simple things he taught her with hands and gestures. They couldn't share words, but they shared warmth. And that became enough. Her body healed faster than her heart. Each day, she looked at him with questions. She couldn't ask, "Who are you, Jacob? Why are you kind? Why do you look at me like I matter? One day, the radio cracked. Static first, then voices. Human command, nearby patrols. Orders to shoot all alien survivors on sight. Kira froze. Jacob turned it off without blinking. He didn't speak. Just stood and loaded his old rifle, not toward her, but toward the door. She realized what he had decided. If someone came, he wouldn't give her up. Kira sat quietly, watching the snow swirl outside the tiny bunker window. She had been part of a world that started this war. A system that forgot to ask questions. But here, in the silence, one human's choice had changed everything. She could still feel the cold inside her bones. But every time he walked past her, offered her tea, or tightened the old thermal blankets, she felt warmth return. Not to her skin, but to something deeper. Something she thought had died long before the war even began. Kira woke before the sun touched the bunker walls. The heater made soft humming sounds, but the rest of the world was silent. Jacob was not inside. She sat up slowly, her arms now stronger, her eyes clearer. The scar on her leg had healed into a dark line. She checked the food pot. It was still warm. That meant he had not gone far. The cold outside still scared her. Her people were not built for snow worlds. Their blood ran hot, made for warm planets, with gentle winds. But now she stepped to the door, pulled it open, and let the icy air bite her cheeks. Jacob was crouched by a snow-covered bush, examining broken footprints. When he turned and saw her, he didn't shout. He just waved her back. Inside with a firm hand. She obeyed, but not because of fear. There was something different in the way he moved today. Tense, focused, like he was expecting something bad. Once they were inside, he handed her a datapad. It wasn't alien tech. It was old human military issue. He had drawn a rough map on it with symbols, circles, arrows, the closest patrols, the safest paths. Kira tilted her head, confused. Then he pointed to the exit tunnel, then at her, then back to the map. She understood what he was saying. It was time to run. She shook her head. His brow tightened. He repeated the gesture. Her eyes didn't blink. She pointed at the bunker floor, then at him, then crossed her arms. "No," she said. Jacob sighed and ran a hand through his frost-stiff hair. He didn't argue. He just looked at her again, eyes full of something unreadable. Then he turned to his gear and began preparing for the night. Hours passed. Neither of them spoke, but the silence felt like a war between two hearts. She had no reason to stay, but she had no reason to leave either. Her people thought her dead. The humans outside would shoot her. But here, she was safe. Jacob didn't force her. But that night, when he lay down on the cot, he pushed the second blanket toward her side. Just a small motion, but enough to say, "I'm not sending you away." She curled into the warmth and slept again. The next morning, she woke to shouting. Outside, boots on snow, voices, human voices, multiple. Close. Jacob grabbed his rifle, pressed a finger to his lips. She nodded. He led her down into the second tunnel. It was cramped and dark, but dry, hidden. He gave her a flashlight and closed the hatch. Not locked, just sealed with ice and silent hands. Kira held her breath for what felt like hours. Then she heard boots thudding overhead. Laughter. English words she couldn't understand. Then silence. Then the sharp crack of something smashing. Her heart pounded. Finally the hatch opened. Jacob stood there, blood on his coat, not his own. His eyes told her everything. They were gone. They wouldn't come back. She crawled out and looked around. The bunker was wrecked. Food spilled, shelves broken. The photo was gone. She gasped. Softly, he didn't flinch. Just started cleaning up. She knelt beside him, helped him fix what they could. That night, she placed a new piece of cloth on the wall where the photo had been. A sketch of a mountain, a fire, and two shadows sitting side by side. He looked at it for a long time, then gave a small nod. They didn't need to speak anymore. She stayed. Days later, when he came back wounded from another supply run, it was her turn to care. She boiled water, dressed his wound, whispered words in her own tongue, soft and low, as he drifted into sleep. She no longer wanted to escape. The war had made her a ghost, but he had given her something stronger than survival. He had given her presence, a place to exist without fear. She began to laugh again. Once, at a joke she made with her hands. He didn't get it, but he smiled anyway. Then one day, the snow began to melt, just slightly, a change in the wind. The cold was ending, but the war wasn't. And with the melt came new dangers. Kira knew she would have to choose soon. Stay hidden in his arms, or step out and face whatever came. But for now, she watched him sleep beside the fire, and for the first time since her ship fell from the sky, she didn't feel alone. The sun had not broken through the clouds in weeks, but Kira could tell the season was changing. The snow melted in patches. Streams trickled through cracks in the rocks. Jacob walked slower now. He checked the sky more often. Something was coming. One afternoon, Kira found him staring at the broken radio. He wasn't fixing it. He was just listening. Static. Faint voices. The war had reached another phase. When she approached, he spoke quietly. "They're retreating." She didn't answer. She just placed her hand over his. Not because she understood everything, but because she could feel the weight in his voice. Later that day, she followed him outside. The wind was warmer. He climbed a ridge and pointed. In the far distance, smoke rose in soft curls, not from weapons, from cities. Human cities returning to life. Kira lowered her eyes. That meant her people had lost the sector. They would not return. She was alone now. Truly alone. But Jacob turned to her and said something else. "You're free." She blinked. The words hit hard. Free. Not hunted. Not a prisoner. Not a guest. Not a ghost. Just free. She nodded slowly. But she didn't smile. That night, they lit a fire outside the bunker. It was the first time since her arrival. The stars shone bright. Jacob handed her a metal cup with something warm. She drank it and winced. It was bitter, but it helped her breathe better. They sat in silence for a long time. Then she pointed at the stars. Named 3 of them in her language. Jacob repeated. "Them, badly." She laughed. He pointed at others. "Name them in English." She tried to say the names back. He laughed. That night, they were not alien and human. They were just 2 survivors. 2 beings staring up at the same sky, trying to find meaning in what was left. In the following days, Jacob rebuilt what he could. The bunker became neater, warmer. He found seeds and planted them in melted soil. Kira helped carry water from the stream. Her skin was no longer pale. Her strength had returned. One evening, he came back with something special. A small mirror, half cracked. He handed it to her with a nod. She hadn't seen her own reflection since the crash. She studied her face, the small scar above her eye, the tired glow in her pupils. She barely recognized the person staring back. She looked up at Jacob and smiled. A real one, but peace never lasted long. 3 days later, a ship passed overhead. Low, heavy, not human, not her people's either, a 3rd flag. Raiders. Jacob pulled her inside, locked the door, shut off every light. They listened in the dark as the ship circled above, then flew past. The next morning, they found the tracks. Burned grass, crushed snow, a message burned into the earth. 1 week, they both understood what it meant. A threat, a promise. The region was marked. The bunker would be found. Jacob paced the bunker for hours, then stopped. He turned to Kira and pointed to the map again, the escape tunnels. The mountain paths. The route away from here. She stepped back. He frowned. Then sighed. He wasn't going to argue. But his eyes pleaded with her. She walked outside, looked at the hills, the stars, the half-dead tree near the fire pit. Her hands trembled. But not from cold. She went back inside and began to pack. She wasn't leaving him. She was preparing to stand beside him. Jacob didn't say anything. He just placed a hand on her shoulder. That was enough. They had a week to prepare. A week before everything burned again, and this time she would not hide underground. Not while he stayed above to fight alone. Kira stood in front of the bunker holding a rusted tool in her hand. She had no real weapons, but she would not run. Jacob was stacking crates near the entrance. He had turned the old storage into a wall. Not strong, but enough to slow someone down. His coat was tied tight, and a rifle rested beside him. They worked without speaking. The days passed quickly. Each sunrise brought more tension, more silence, but also more understanding. Kira learned how to set traps, how to spot distant movement in snow, how to reload a weapon by feel. She was fast with her hands, her eyes sharp. Jacob noticed. At night, they took turns sleeping. One always awake, listening, watching. The raiders hadn't returned yet, but the fear lived in their bones. On the fourth day, they spotted a drone. It buzzed low, scanned the land, and zipped back to the clouds. Jacob cursed. Kira grabbed the map. They circled two places in red. One was the bunker. The other was an old mining facility half a day's walk away. If the raiders struck, they would come from there. Jacob wanted to move first, hit them before they arrived. Kira disagreed. It was too risky, too open. They argued with hands and eyes. Neither one angry, both afraid. In the end, they chose to stay, to defend. It was home now, and home was worth the risk. That night, Jacob showed her how to use the emergency flare. One shot, one light. He told her it was not for fighting. It was for signaling help. If there was still anyone left to help. Kira didn't ask who he was hoping would answer. She just nodded. Call on the next day. They found animal tracks torn apart near the stream. Not natural, burn marks, plasma fire. The raiders were close. Jacob reinforced the doors. Kira set the last traps. They shared one meal in silence, a can of something tasteless. But it was warm. That was enough. She looked at him. He looked tired. Older, not because of age, but because of memory. He had seen too much, lost too much. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. They sat there for a while. No words, just warmth in the fading light. Then the sky turned black. Not from night, from smoke. The mountain facility had been destroyed. The raiders were clearing out obstacles, clearing a path toward them. Jacob picked up his rifle. Kira picked up her blade. She was not strong, but she was ready. They looked at each other one last time before the storm began. And for the first time, Kira whispered a word in his language. Home. Asterisk. The first blast shook the bunker just after midnight. Dirt fell from the ceiling. The heater flickered. Jacob didn't move. Kira was already by the side hatch, blade in hand. Her body trembled, not from fear, but from the deep cold returning through the open seams. The raiders came with lights and drones. Their voices echoed in strange languages. Jacob looked through the scope and waited. The first one stepped into the trap. A sharp crack, a scream, then silence. The others spread out. Kira moved like a shadow, fast and silent. She struck from behind, hit a raider's helmet, then vanished back into cover. Jacob opened fire from above. One shot, one fall. He didn't waste bullets. They were outnumbered, but they were not weak. Every step forward cost the invaders another soldier. An explosion tore open part of the wall. Snow burst inward. Kira was thrown back, her arms scraped across stone. She pushed herself up and ran toward Jacob. He pulled her behind cover. His eyes scanned her quickly. No broken bones, just blood. She nodded. He handed her a knife. Closer range now. The bunker shook again. The old door bent inward. Another blast and it would collapse. Kira ran toward the emergency tunnel. She triggered a hidden charge. The ceiling above the door fell. The entrance sealed under rock and ice, but now they were trapped inside. The raiders didn't stop. One of them dropped into the ventilation shaft. Jacob grabbed it mid-fall and snapped its neck. The body hit the ground with a thud. They had minutes. Maybe less. Jacob handed her the flare. She shook her head. He insisted. She climbed up the narrow shaft to the roof. Wind howled around her. Snow stung her face. She aimed the flare into the dark sky and pulled the trigger. A brilliant red streak cut across the clouds. A signal. A cry. A final chance. Kira dropped back down. Her knees gave out. Jacob caught her. They breathed together in the dark as the enemy approached. Suddenly, outside there was a sound. Engines. Low and loud. Not raider machines, something heavier. Something human. The raiders stopped, shouted, fired upward. The sound of gunships roared above the bunker. Then came the thunder of weapons from the sky. Jacob pulled Kira close as dust rained from the ceiling. The whole bunker shook with battle, but they stayed still. Together, then silence returned. Broken, cold, but peaceful. The trapdoor opened. A soldier in full armor stepped down. His visor flashed. He looked at Kira, then at Jacob, then lowered his weapon. "You're safe now." The bunker door opened for the first time in days. Smoke drifted past the broken walls. Snow mixed with ash on the ground outside. Kira stepped out beside Jacob. Her wounds were wrapped. Her hands still shook, but her eyes were clear. Soldiers moved through the wreckage. Human troops. They didn't speak to her at first. They spoke only to Jacob. They looked confused, suspicious. Some even stared with cold eyes. Jacob stood beside her without flinching. When they asked about her, he spoke just one sentence. "She stayed and fought beside me." That was all he sighed, and no one dared question him again. A few days later, they were taken to a larger base. Warm walls. Clean air, noise, too much noise. Machines, people, voices shouting orders. Kira felt small again. Doctors checked her. They were surprised by how well she had healed. One asked if she was some kind of experiment. Jacob told him to leave. Kira found herself sitting by a window most days, watching other humans move past. Some gave her curious looks. Some gave her nothing at all. She didn't blame them. This wasn't her world. Her people had started this war. She was a symbol of what they had feared. But she was also something else now. Something different. She looked at her reflection again, no longer pale. No longer a guest. She was alive. And not just because of warm clothes or food. Because of him. Jacob stayed nearby, never far. He spent most of his time helping repair bunkers or clearing old routes. But every evening, he returned and sat beside her without a word. One night, a commander approached her. She expected questions, orders, but the woman only asked one thing. "Do you want to go back?" Kira didn't answer at first. Her fingers tapped the table. Then she looked toward Jacob. He was reading something, unaware of the conversation. She shook her head slowly. "No." The commander nodded and walked away. Jacob looked up. "You all right?" Kira smiled gently. "Yes." Later, Jacob showed her a map. It wasn't a battle plan. It was a world map. Not of Earth, but of newly settled colonies. Green dots marked safe zones. Blue marked new communities. One of them was circled in red. He pointed at it. Then at her. Then at himself. She blinked. "Together?" He nodded once. Kira folded the map and held it to her chest. She didn't know what would come next. Peace was never certain. The scars of war didn't vanish with snow. But one thing was clear. She wasn't alone anymore. Not now. Not ever. The transport ship lifted from the snow-covered field. Its engines roared low, steady, full of promise. Kira stood at the top of the ramp, watching the old bunker fade into the distance. Jacob stood beside her, holding his pack. He didn't look back. He had seen enough of that place. Enough cold, enough war. He was ready for something new. Their seats on the ship were near the rear, quiet, tucked away from the crowd. A few people stared at Kira when she walked past. Some with fear, some with wonder. But none said anything. She didn't care anymore. She wasn't here to prove herself to anyone. She was here because she chose to be. And because someone had chosen her too. The ship broke through the clouds. A soft light filled the cabin. Kira looked out the window. Snow turned to sky. Then sky turned to stars. She reached for Jacob's hand. He didn't hesitate. They traveled. For days through space. Each stop brought more people. Survivors, builders, dreamers, no soldiers. Only those ready to start again. At last they landed on the colony world. The air was warm. The trees were tall and green. Water sparkled along hillsides. No ruins, no smoke. No fences. Kira stepped out first. She took a breath and closed her eyes. The sun felt strange on her skin. But not unwelcome. Jacob carried their supplies toward a small cabin. Pre-built. Simple. Waiting. Inside. It smelled like new wood and silence. A small table. A pair of chairs. 2 beds. 1 lamp. It was enough. Kira placed the map on the wall. The one with the red circle. The place they now stood. Jacob cooked their first meal while she arranged a few things from her old satchel. Small objects, useless but meaningful. She placed them near the window. They ate without many words, just glances, soft smiles. The kind that needed no explanation. That night, she stood outside the cabin. The stars were different here. New constellations. Strange skies. But they no longer scared her. Jacob joined her with 2 cups of tea. He handed her one. They drank in silence. Kira looked at him and spoke the first full sentence. She had learned in his language. This is home now. He nodded. Slowly. Later, as the wind moved gently through the trees, she rested her head on his shoulder. The cold was gone. Not just the ice. The cold in her heart. The cold of being lost. The cold of being alone. She had woken up in a stranger's arms that day. She had planned to leave. To return. To run. But he had shown her something greater than safety. He had given her a reason to stay. Now wrapped in peace with his hand in hers. She knew one thing. She would never leave again.